The air in the attorney's office was heavy with tension, thick enough to choke on. I sat at the polished mahogany table, my hands trembling slightly as the executor read my late husband's will. 4 decades, we had built a life together, a company, an empire worth millions. I believed that, in the end, we had secured not just wealth, but a legacy for our family. But when the words were spoken, I felt my heart stop. $30 million, to be divided equally between Stephen and Daniel. And then silence. Nothing for me. Nothing for the woman who stood by him for 40 years, who fought beside him through every battle, who gave everything she had. My sons shifted in their seats, one smirking with satisfaction, the other avoiding my eyes. The executor handed me a single envelope, worn and thin. "And for you, Eleanor," he said flatly, "your husband left this." I stared at the envelope in my hands, disbelief turning to dread. Was this all I was worth? Little did they know. Inside this envelope was a secret that would change everything. I remember staring at that envelope as if it carried the weight of my entire life. My sons, Stephen and Daniel, sat across from me like vultures circling a carcass. One smirked in triumph, already planning how to spend his share of the millions. The other shifted restlessly, his fingers tapping the table, his guilt leaking through every nervous movement. The lawyer's words echoed in my ears. $30 million, split between them. Nothing for me. The man I had devoted 40 years to had left me with nothing but a fragile slip of paper. But the truth was far more complicated. That envelope did not hold scraps. It held a key, a thread that could unravel everything my sons thought they had won. As the executor closed his briefcase and left the room, my sons leaned in. "Well, Mother," Stephen sneered. "Looks like Father finally saw things clearly. You don't need money at your age. You'll be fine." His arrogance cut deeper than any blade. Beside him, Daniel avoided my eyes, staring instead at the polished floor. His silence was almost worse than Stephen's cruelty. I kept my face calm, my fingers tightening around the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper, yellowed and creased with time. A document my husband had hidden away for decades. What they didn't know, what they couldn't even imagine, was that my husband's real fortune was not in the company shares, nor in the assets they greedily divided. His true wealth was buried deeper, protected by a secret account, one that dwarfed the 30 million they were celebrating. As I looked at my sons, my heart was torn. They were my children, the boys I had raised. I remembered holding them as babies, their laughter, their first steps. But somewhere along the way, greed had poisoned them, twisting their love into entitlement. Stephen saw me only as an obstacle to power. Daniel, weak and drowning in his addictions, was too broken to fight for anything but his next escape. And me. I was supposed to fade quietly into the background, forgotten, discarded. But they underestimated me. This envelope was not my defeat. It was my weapon. It was the beginning of a game they didn't even know they were playing. And by the time it ended, everything they thought belonged to them would be ripped away. The battle lines had been drawn in that lawyer's office. They thought the war was over, that they had already won. But they were wrong. So very wrong. Long before the inheritance battles, before lawyers and envelopes, there was love, or at least, what I thought was love. My husband and I began with nothing. He was ambitious, clever, and tireless. I was devoted, willing to support him in every dream, every risk, every sleepless night. Together, we clawed our way out of poverty, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. We built a company that became the cornerstone of our fortune. I handled the accounts, the endless paperwork, the phone calls at midnight. He made the deals, charmed investors, and stood proudly as the face of our empire. Behind every contract he signed, I was there, quiet, invisible, but essential. Our sons were born into this growing wealth. Stephen, our first, was sharp from an early age. He watched his father carefully, copying his mannerisms, his cold ambition. Daniel, our second, was different. Gentler at first, sensitive, always seeking approval. I hoped he would be the balance, the heart our family needed. But wealth has a way of corroding the soul. As the company grew, so did the distance between us. My husband became harder, less forgiving. Stephen idolized him, craving his praise, and in doing so, absorbed his arrogance. Daniel, unable to keep up with the expectations, drifted into darker paths, parties, addictions, desperate attempts to numb the pressure of being the weaker son. And me. I became invisible. The woman who once stood beside her husband as an equal partner was reduced to a shadow in her own home. I was the mother who raised their children, the wife who stood by through betrayal after betrayal, the quiet figure behind closed doors who swallowed her pain for the sake of the family name. Yet, despite it all, I believed, foolishly, that love and loyalty would be enough. That when the time came, when we grew old, we would sit together and look back at what we had built, proud of what we left behind. But I was wrong. The seeds of greed had already taken root in my sons, watered by their father's harshness and indulgence. By the time my husband died, the family I had fought to protect was already gone, replaced by strangers with my children's faces. So when I opened that envelope, when I saw what he had left me, I realized something. This was not a mistake. It was a message. My husband knew exactly what he was doing. He left them the obvious prize, but he left me the secret weapon. And with it, I would decide the future of everything we had built. The days after the will reading were the hardest of my life. Stephen wasted no time. Within hours, he began acting like the new patriarch of the family. He called the board, arranged meetings, and signed papers with the same smug confidence I had seen in his father. Except Stephen wasn't building. He was stripping, selling, and taking whatever he could for himself. Daniel, on the other hand, spiraled deeper into his addictions. He came to the house late at night, smelling of alcohol, his hands shaking. "Mother," he whispered once, his voice breaking. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." His guilt was real, but it didn't stop him from taking his share. Weakness is its own form of betrayal. And me. They treated me as though I had already died. Stephen ignored me outright, barking orders at staff as if I were invisible. Daniel avoided my gaze, ashamed but powerless. The woman who had sacrificed everything was now dismissed as a useless relic. But inside my trembling hands was that envelope. And inside that envelope, a secret. When I finally tore it open, I expected maybe a letter, an apology, a cruel joke. Instead, I found a single sheet of paper, covered in my husband's unmistakable handwriting. At first glance, it looked meaningless, a string of numbers, a foreign bank's name, a location. But my heart skipped a beat. I knew exactly what it was. It was the access code to a hidden account. An account my husband had whispered about in the early days, back when we built everything together. I had almost forgotten, believing it was just a story, a fantasy. But here it was, proof in black ink, that he had left me something far greater than $30 million. That moment changed everything. The betrayal that had shattered me only hours before was now fuel. My sons thought they had taken everything, but in reality, they had been handed scraps. What lay in my hands was enough to destroy them, or to save me. The inciting spark had been lit. The game was no longer about grief or loss. It was about survival, power, and vengeance. And for the first time in years, I felt alive. Could not afford mistakes. I reread the document 100 times, each number etched into my memory. It wasn't just a code, it was a path. A Swiss bank account, hidden offshore, one my husband had concealed even from our lawyers, even from his closest allies. I started small, testing the waters. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I searched records, cross-checked the bank's name, pieced together clues from conversations I half remembered decades ago. Slowly, the story unraveled. My husband had been preparing for this all along. He knew greed would consume Stephen. He knew Daniel would falter. And he knew only I had the discipline to protect what truly mattered. Meanwhile, the cracks in my family deepened. Stephen grew bolder. He hosted lavish dinners, flaunted new cars, and spoke to me with open disdain. "Mother," he scoffed one evening, swirling a glass of wine, "you should be grateful father left you anything at all. That envelope. Sentimental nonsense. He probably pitied you. His cruelty no longer cut me the way it once did." I merely smiled, keeping my secret close. Daniel, however, began to unravel. He came to me in desperation, his voice shaking, his eyes bloodshot. "Mother, I can't do this. I can't live up to Stephen, to father. I'll lose everything." His fear was genuine, but he was too broken to stand on his own. I pitied him, but I could not trust him. Every day, I rehearsed the decision. Should I reveal the account? Should I confront them? Or should I keep silent, guarding the fortune until the time was right? The pressure mounted when I received a letter, an official notice from the Swiss bank, verifying the account. My husband had not only created it, but had left clear instructions for me alone. It was worth more than everything else combined. Hundreds of millions. The secret was now a ticking clock. If Stephen or Daniel discovered it, they would tear me apart. But if I played my cards carefully, I could turn the tables, taking back the power they thought they had stolen. It was no longer just about inheritance. It was about justice. And I was ready to fight for it. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. Stephen, drunk on his own power, stormed into the mansion's study one evening. His eyes burned with arrogance, his suit jacket draped carelessly over his shoulder. "Mother," he barked, "I've spoken to the lawyers. The company is mine now. Whatever little fantasy you're holding on to, let it go. You are finished." I stayed seated, the paper from the envelope hidden beneath my hand. I met his stare with calm silence, a composure that only fueled his rage. Daniel followed him in, looking pale and broken. He muttered, "Stephen, leave her be," but his voice lacked strength. He was a shadow of the boy I once held in my arms. Stephen slammed his fist onto the desk. "What is it, Mother? That envelope. Do you think it means anything? You're pathetic." I slid the paper slowly across the desk toward him. His smirk faltered as his eyes scanned the numbers, the bank's name. His face hardened. This isn't real," he stammered, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Daniel leaned in, confused, desperate. "What is it? What's going on?" I rose from my chair, my voice steady, sharp like a blade. "Your father left you crumbs. 30 million was nothing compared to this. The real fortune, the one neither of you earned, was entrusted to me, because he knew only I had the strength to wield it." The room went silent except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock. Stephen's arrogance cracked, replaced by fury. Daniel's eyes widened, torn between greed and shame. 4 years, they had dismissed me, treated me as invisible. But now, in this moment, the power was mine. Stephen lunged forward, grabbing at the paper. I snatched it back before his fingers could touch it. "Don't you dare," I hissed. "You think you can control me? You think I'll surrender? No. I will decide what becomes of this family's empire. Not you." Daniel, trembling, whispered, "Mother, please, don't shut me out." His voice was broken, his hands shaking as he reached for me. But my decision was already made. I looked at them, my sons, corrupted and ruined by greed, and for the first time in decades, I felt no fear. "This game is over," I declared. "From this day forward, everything changes. And you will learn what it means to lose." The house was silent after the storm of voices and accusations. For the first time in years, I no longer felt like a ghost in my own home. My sons sat before me, their pride shattered, their illusions burned to ash. Stephen paced like a caged animal, his hands shaking, his confidence gone. His arrogance had always been his weapon, but now it was useless against the truth. "You can't control this, Mother," he growled, though his voice quivered. "The company needs me." "No," I said firmly, my voice carrying through the heavy room. "The company needs stability. And I will not allow you to destroy what we built with your greed." His jaw clenched, but he said nothing more. For once, he had no power here. Daniel sat slumped in the corner, his face pale, his hands clutching his head. Tears slid down his cheeks, the weight of his failures pressing down on him. "I never wanted this," he whispered. "I just wanted peace, but I don't know how to escape." I looked at him, my heart torn between pity and resolve. I could not save him from himself, not until he chose to fight his own demons. But I could protect what little remained of our family's legacy. In the days that followed, the balance shifted. The boardroom no longer answered to Stephen. The estate staff no longer deferred to him. They looked to me, the widow they had once dismissed. I stepped into the role I had always been denied: leader, protector, survivor. The document from the envelope became my shield and my sword. With the Swiss account, I secured influence, power, and the respect my husband had withheld in life. For the first time, I was not the shadow behind a man. I was the one in control. Stephen left the house in fury, but his absence brought quiet. Daniel remained, lost but subdued, lingering at the edges like a ghost of the boy he once was. And me. I walked through the mansion's halls with my head held high, no longer invisible. The aftermath was not victory, It was survival. The war had left scars. But it also left me with something far greater than wealth. Freedom. When the storm had passed and silence settled into the mansion, I walked through the halls I had once feared. Every corner carried memories, laughter from birthdays, heated arguments, moments of hope, and the quiet sorrows I endured in silence. For so long, I had been invisible, overlooked by the very people I had sacrificed everything for. Now, at last, I understood. The fortune, the empire, the company, all of it had been built with my hands just as much as with my husband's. Yet I had allowed myself to be diminished, to be told I was unworthy, that my place was in the shadows. My sons had mirrored his mistakes, treating me as if I had no voice, no power. But I did. I always did. The envelope, that fragile slip of paper, was not just about money. It was a reminder. A key not only to wealth, but to the truth that I had been strong all along. My husband, in his final act, had chosen me as the guardian of the family's future. Perhaps it was guilt, or perhaps it was love, but in the end, it was recognition. And my sons? They were victims of their own choices. Stephen, blinded by arrogance, lost the very respect he craved. Daniel, drowning in weakness, became a prisoner of his fears. They inherited money, but they lost everything else. I, on the other hand, gained something greater than wealth. I gained freedom. The freedom to stand without apology. The freedom to protect what truly mattered. Not the empire, not the money, but the dignity I had fought for my whole life. This story is not just about betrayal. It is about endurance. About finding strength in the face of abandonment. About realizing that sometimes, the greatest inheritance is not what you are given, but what you discover within yourself. I had been silenced for decades. Now, my voice carried through these halls. And though the scars remain, so does the strength. Because in the end, power is not in the money. Power is in the will to rise, even when the world tries to bury you. And so, this was how it ended. Not with the sound of applause or celebration, but with silence, and the quiet strength of a woman who refused to be erased. I was left with nothing in the beginning, and yet, in the end, I held everything that truly mattered. The truth, my dignity, and the power to choose my own future. If this story has taught me anything, it is this. Wealth may fade, families may betray, but resilience endures. Perhaps you, too, have felt invisible at times. Perhaps you've been pushed aside, underestimated, or forgotten. But know this, you are stronger than they believe. And sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply to rise, to stand unbroken. This was my story. But it could just as easily be anyone's. Speech balloon, what about you? Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you loved, or been forced to find strength in unexpected places? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your story too. And if this tale moved you, don't let it be the last. There are more stories. Stories of love, betrayal, survival, and justice that will take you on a journey through the deepest corners of the human heart. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe now, turn on the notification bell, and join me for the next chapter. Because life has a way of writing stories far stranger and more powerful than fiction. Until then, remember, strength isn't given. It's found.